Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and moderator, and I'm also the creator of thechocolatelife.com. Today, I'm really excited. As you may be able to tell, I'm animated in a way that I am not always, because I have a special guest connecting live from Nicaragua, from Granada, Nicaragua, not Grenada. It's Granada. It's really important that you get it right. And we're going to be joining, she's going to be joining us in just a second. But before I do that, what I want to do is, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, please go into the comments or live chat. Let us know where in the world you're connecting from. We'll get that shout out up on screen. And of course, if you have questions for my special guest today or comments, get them, and we'll get those questions up on screen and asked and answered. And with that, I just want to go straight into today's episode and say hello to Sally McFadyen, who's one of the co-founders of Argencove Chocolate, located in Granada, Nicaragua. So Sally, welcome today.
Thank you so much. How are you going?
You know, it's a beautiful day here in Prescott, Arizona, and I imagine it's getting to be beyond chocolate melting weather where you are in Granada.
It is. It's definitely a little bit less hot. We normally talk about it here as how is it hot, more hot, or less hot. So as opposed to cool, so it's a touch less hot. But we're still a few hours.
I like that. You know, I've been to Nicaragua on 4 separate occasions between 2014 and 2017. I was involved with a major cacao producer, an aggregator in the country. I've visited Granada. I've been to other parts of the country, but and I'm familiar with a number of other small chocolate makers who are actually Nicaraguan origin.
Yeah.
Right. So, but obviously from your accent, you're not from Nicaragua. So can you tell us, to get started, a little bit about your journey from Australia, right,
yes,
to where you are in Nicaragua? And we'll pick it up after. We'll pick up my questions about that on the other side of that.
Yeah, sure. Very common question. So we're an Australian family, and we were living in Peru for a few years on a different project, and basically ourselves with a group of other Australians, we developed this a fine food project, and with the fine flavour cacao and fine chocolate, and we looked at what country we wanted to do this in. We knew that we wanted to make the chocolate in a cacao producing country, so the impact was there within the producing country. And we just started to find all the diversity of cacao, when you really talk about 2-3 ingredient chocolate. So really interesting. My background's environmental science originally, so the actual growing of the cacao and the orchard, I really enjoyed. And so basically we looked at what different countries to develop the project in, and we chose Nicaragua. So it's the sort of short bit.
So just for full disclosure, your husband Peter and I had been in conversation back in 2015, and questions about where in the world should you do this were part of our conversation. But when I think of Northern Australia, right, I don't think of like really interesting food cultures. So when you talk, we had a chance to talk for a few minutes beforehand. The food culture in Lima is amazing. So did you arrive in Lima with this, real interest? I'm trying to imagine, you're just across from Papua New Guinea. Is there any Polynesian influence? I mean, what was, and I realize, you said you haven't lived in Australia for 20 years. And so what it is now is different, but it's important because we're talking about origins. What were the influences that got you started?
So, so it's been about 20 years since we're in Darwin. Left Australia about 11 years ago. So in Darwin, we live in the north part of Australia. In Darwin, there is a lot of Asian influence. There's some of the most amazing markets. Have like luxes for breakfast. A lot of different interesting Asian foods. So there's that influence there. And when we went to Peru, and we lived in Lima, everyone was like, "Oh, the food's amazing," and which it is. And I guess living in Lima and having that exposure to the food culture there, I think just the the importance on natural ingredients, simple ingredients, quality ingredients, definitely, I would say, rubbed off. And we're certainly very fortunate, and our appreciation for that really grew. So,
Right.
yeah.
So, so I was at the Salon de Cacao y Chocolate, right, in 13, 14, 15, and 17. I don't remember meeting either you or Peter when I was there.
Yeah.
But when we think of some of the standouts in terms of food culture there, obviously Mistura, this huge food festival, and then Gaston Curio and Astrid Gutje,
Yes.
in their restaurants.
Yeah.
When I was there in 2016, I got a chance to go to Central, which at that time was one of the top 10 restaurants in the world.
And it takes months to get in, like, to those. I think now it takes 6 months to get in. Do you know what I mean? So,
well, at the time, the person I was with is a guy by the name of Chris Curtin, and he's the founder of Eclat Chocolate here in the United States. But he used a chocolate bar for Anthony Bourdain and Eric Ripert, and obviously, when you can drop those names, when you say, "I'm a friend of Tony and Eric," right? All of a sudden, you can get next day reservations, which we did.
Yeah,
it was one of the most interesting and at the same time one of the most disappointing meals I've ever had in my entire life. But that's a separate conversation. But when you arrived in Peru, you still hadn't decided that your food project was going to be in cocoa, right? That decision crystallized when you were in Peru.
Absolutely. So we're in Peru for a different project. Basically, my husband Pete did his executive MBA, and part of that, he chose that because he wanted to do develop a business, a project, and through that really started to explore the fine food, industry and different options. And the really getting into the fine flavor, cocoa just really, and I guess demand and looking to the future. And we really started to get more of appreciation than a fine chocolate as well. And that really, I guess, got that, where the project was born, and then going forward and looking at where to develop it.
Yeah, so my background is that I got into the chocolate business as a result of a business decision.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so I said, there are no in 1994. Oh, there are no professional chocolate critics. I'm going to become a professional chocolate critic.
Yeah.
Right. And so I got into chocolate not because I love chocolate. I learned to love chocolate as a result of the decision. Yeah. So were you guys big chocolate fans? I mean, in Lima, or did your appreciation for it come about as a result of your, exploration into cacao fino, right?
Yeah.
Fine flavor cacao, and Lima is it's the home to cacao suyo. Right, and there is the Salon de Cacao y Chocolate bringing Chatel is there.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting cocoa and lots of really interesting chocolate that are being produced in Peru.
Yeah, I would definitely say the latter. So we, I guess, the appreciation of good food, fine food, I guess, was already there. But as far as really deep diving into and getting to know more of more detail into the cacao fino or the fine chocolate, definitely evolved with more investigation and talking to people within the industry and getting to know all the amazing things they were doing. And so I'd say that more developed through that.
Right. So did you do a lot of exploration while you were in Peru? I mean, we think of, down near Cusco and Chuncho and that area of origin, up in San Martin, which is famous or notorious for CCN 51, and then in Huánuco. But, there's a lot of specialty cacao, which is being grown in the Ucayali River area. And then if you go up to the Piura, towards Amazonas through Chulacanes and to the east. Did you do that exploration in Peru to really understand, things on the ground, or did you show up in Nicaragua and say, we're going to be cocoa farmers?
I think, there were a couple of things that we looked at. We did consider Peru. However, we were also looking at, we looked at other countries besides Peru. I get, we had already been there for some time, and we were really looking at, yes, we considered Peru, but we looked at a variety of different countries. And one of the things that we really liked about Nicaragua was, Pete came here and visited various times, went and saw different farms. We did different testing on, different beans that we found, and fermented them and sent them off, and really just thought there was a lot of opportunity here. I guess there were already some great people here doing some amazing stuff, and so definitely. And I really like Nicaragua. Like, it's quite.
I think people have this. I mean, Americans have this impression of, really interesting political violence associated with the ruling family. And recently there's been a lot of it. But, one of the things that most people don't know is that it is a beautiful country, and the people, right, are really, really friendly. And what I want to do now is just do a quick screen share for people. So people may know that for every single post of Pod Save Chocolate I put together, or for every single episode I put together a post, and this is the post. It's live. You can go there, and there are links to visit the Argencove website. And we're going to be doing a tasting. I had forgotten about that. So in about 15 minutes, we're going to start a tasting or so. But, these are pictures from your Instagram, and this is taken on your farm.
Yes, correct.
Right. So let's, so before we get into that in a little more depth, what I want to do is do a quick shout out to Mark and Yuri at Blue Spruce Chocolate in Kittredge, Colorado. I want to say thanks, guys, for joining us again, and saying these interviews are most informative. That's why I do them. They're not just informative for you, but I learn stuff as well. And it's learning something new every day that keeps me excited and interesting. So I'm really, really, like, as much as I know about having been to Nicaragua, these occasions, there's a lot more to know, right? And as much, so these are really, really exciting for me, and I'm glad you find them too. So, so when I think of where cacao, or the most productive cacao growing regions of Nicaragua, I'm thinking you head north out of Managua through Matagalpa into the mountains around La Dalia El Qua, which is coffee growing territory, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And your farm is outside Granada somewhere, which means it's in a coastal plain. So did the location of the farm determine the location of the factory, or did the decision to locate in Granada said we want the farm close by?
So the farm factory was separate, and afterwards. So basically, when we looked at a lot of different farms, as anyone does with these sorts of projects. I think the guys at the soil sample lab were getting a bit sick of us sending them in. One of the things we love about Nicaragua is the fertile soils, and basically, from doing a fair amount of research, and for us, what was important is that. Yes, a lot of the regions, the cacao growing here is in the further north, where there's a lot more rainfall, basically. For us, what we really were looking for was a farm location with a minimum of 1,500 millimeter of rainfall per year, so naturally you're still getting a fair amount of rain. You would have to irrigate for some months of the year, but basically what happens is you have a break in the disease pressure. So we specifically chose this climate of where we are. Everyone's different, but for us, it was important that we had bigger break in the rainy season to help reduce disease pressure. And so for that, it's quite windy, and there's a balance with wind. Obviously, you don't want too much, or they're going to, get rid of all your flowers. But there's really good ventilation. So from a disease point of view, it was a specific choice, balancing fertile soils, the rainfall naturally occurring, wind speed. We did all wind measuring, for farm location.
Right. So while a lot of people get into the chocolate business because it's romantic, or they have this romantic notion of it. And there might have been a romance to it. This was, in fact, a very, very considered technical decision,
Yeah.
which is what I'm getting. Yeah, you have to balance rainfall with humidity. You do have wind flow and how that's going to help manage the humidity, because fungal diseases thrive in humidity, and it's a
Monelia.
hugely complicated system. So I'm guessing that the farm was already planted in what you consider to be cacao pheno varieties. No,
No,
you're shaking your head.
No. Like it was an abandoned farm.
Which varieties you were going to plant?
So we went through a bit of an exercise where we started doing, learning fermentation, and we sought the advice of both Dan O'Doherty from Cacao Services and also Darren Sucker from the Cocoa Research Centre in Trinidad and Tobago. And so, which I really think, when people talk about what has influenced you where you are, fermentation, as you know, is critical. And we're very grateful at that stage. We took that advice to get the different technical expertise. So, we started we'd started fermenting and playing around with different beans. We found some local genetics, Nicaraguan Trinitario specials.
When I was working with APEN, so the Asociación Productores Exportadores Nicaragua, I hope I got that right, to develop a branding scheme. So what ended up is Cacaos de Nicaragua, because they already have a Coffees de Nicaragua, right?
Yeah.
I had to spend 6 months learning about the history of cocoa in Nicaragua, and finding about the genetics and the way it was really, really highly prized in Europe in the 1700s. And then varieties went to Trinidad and were, part of the genetic base for the original Trinitario crosses, and then those coming back to Nicaragua for the acriollados or neocriollos. I mean, the genetics in the country are just amazing. And, people think about Venezuela or, the genetics in Venezuela. Well, a lot of the genetics in Venezuela, came from Nicaragua, apparently.
And it was in 2016. I was going to say, we had decided to come here, and I think around exactly the same time, basically it was in 2016, I believe, or 2015, that Nicaragua was actually officially internationally recognized as a country with of cacao phenol.
Yeah, I think it was in the 2015. I think it was 2015. So ICO, the International Cocoa Organization, maintains a list of countries that are exporting fine cocoa, right? Yeah. And Nicaragua joined that list in 2015. Almost solely by the work being done by Ingeman, to get that being done. And when we talk about fermentation, Nicaragua for many years was like, if you want, just really technified fermentation, it was like a place you go take a look, and how do you implement it at scale. And so, that influence and that availability and that understanding, I think, is really, 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 really wonderful to go and do, and have as a base for the work that you're doing. But what I want to do before we jump back into this, I want to do a quick shout out to Mike King, Encore Coffee Company in Kansas City, Missouri. We need to make sure we're in the right Kansas City. So Mike, thanks for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you here. And Sally, what I'd like to do is do a quick walkthrough, if we can, about what are we seeing in this picture?
Okay, so on our farm we have grafted clones that you can see there, for example, different cacao trees, but we also have seed trees as well, and some of them are more like some of these. So basically, from our farm design, what do we want to plant? There was some, as I said, there's some really interesting just local genetics that we found. We planted those, and then from seed, and in process of then grafting, and then we also planted some others which vary from Costa Rica Catty, to commercial series to EETs to different ICS 139, like a variety of different other ones and UFs and other stuff.
So for people who might not be aware, ICS stands for Imperial College Selection, right? And these are varieties which are maintained in the gene bank in Trinidad, I believe. The EAT varieties, the EET varieties, are Ecuadorian, so out of the research station in Ecuador. And then you mentioned
UF.
some others. You said Cartier, right?
Yes.
From Costa Rica. So this is not a monoculture. You're doing lots of different things. Are you harvesting and fermenting them separately, or are you harvesting them and fermenting them all together?
Yeah, separately. I mean, some of them, and obviously as they get older, some of them are separate, some of them are grouped. The way the farm is set up is in like different lots, I guess. I guess if you want to use the comparison of vineyards, so that genetic X or XYZ, whatever, are in one. They're there. So when we harvest, obviously, we can say to the guys, okay, when we harvest, we're going to harvest hectare 1 and 2. They get fermented together, or they don't, or whatever. So
makes a lot of sense. And so the pods are pulled off the tree. I see somebody's got a 5-gallon bucket full of pods.
Yeah.
5-gallon bucket, 19 liters or something like that. I forget what the conversion is. Now, are the whole pods taken to the fermentary and they're opened and put into fermentation right away, or are they opened under the trees and then the wet mass is transported?
Just there. So basically everything is right about where that guy is, about like probably 30 meters away is where the boys cut, and then they're the fermentation boxes. So it's just there. Everything's
So it's fairly compact and centralized. There's a design which is around efficiency, not I have this farm and I have road access here, so it makes sense to make sure that this is where I'm going to put stuff.
Yeah.
So it makes an enormous amount of sense. And one of the great things, and it's like, I mean, Nicaraguans just for the most part are just really, really happy. I mean, it's been great. I enjoyed it. So can you go take a look? I mean, for people who haven't, seen it, this is what fresh cacao beans look, and baba. Cacao and baba, I think the Spanish translation of that is slime, right, or something like that. And this looks like a particularly wet. So
that's just cut open, and I actually just said I've actually got a couple of pods here right now. We did pick them a couple of days ago, but if you want, I'll actually just, if I can like cut it without cutting my computer cord.
We don't want it's connections like this are all you. Oh, is that a machete? You got a machete in your?
No.
Okay, it's just a kitchen knife. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So the guys would normally use a machete.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. All right.
So so what I've just done, I've cut that open, and I didn't want to cut too much of it. So I'll cut.
It looks fairly fresh.
Yeah. Yep. So let me try and pull that out. And so I guess what's cool, and it's really important, like anything, you've got to start with good quality input. So, it's rolling away. It's a bit hard to see in the light. So, you can see that these seeds.
A little hard to see. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
See the white.
Well, so I'll tell you what, we have
other
seeds.
photos.
So this is what you've got holding in your hand, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's quite juicy. And often when people come, we say, hey, if you want, you can suck on them and then not chew or swallow the seed, but spit them out because it's quite bitter. But and it's really sweet. It's actually quite pleasant. And you can see why people would cut them open and why it would go, but tricky to see how it would get from there to chocolate. So
figuring out this and going to chocolate, I have a theory about how that gets done. But what I want to say is we're going to start a tasting here in about 5 minutes, and I want to get through images and things like that. But what I will say to anybody, if you're making chocolate and you have not yet been to a farm in a producing country, right? And you pull a pod off a tree and it's so fresh that the pod has not yet gotten lonely for the tree, right? Or
Yeah.
the tree is not missing its pod yet, and you have not tasted fresh pulp, you have to go, right?
Yeah.
I remember one of my great experiences when I was in Peru. We were in a clonal garden, which was being maintained by TechnoServe
Yep.
for the USAID project there. And they had 30 different varieties. And we walked from one in rows, and we walked from one tree to the next tree to the next tree to the next tree row, and
Yep.
opened up, and we're able to smell and taste all these different varieties of pulp.
Yep.
It is one of the most amazing culinary experiences I've had in my entire life. If you've never done it, you have to go do it.
Yeah.
So let's go think about, so pods on trees, they're always pods on trees. But do you know actually the particular varietal this is by sight? I mean, you chose it to put it up on Instagram.
Yeah, that one, no. So you can see that one's a seed tree. Okay.
Okay.
I can tell that because, and for the tree in the background. So the stem comes up, and it will vary. Let me change it around as this bus passes. So a grafted clone, right at the base we would normally try and split so that it has 3, or, let's just as general, there are other different, what people might do, but 3 primary stems that come up, which you would have seen on, I think, the hero photo of at the beginning. And then, then they split again. Again, with the time, it's tricky, but, we try and get into how many, linear light meters of branching you have. So that is, per tree, so where the sun arrives and obviously contacts the cells, the cushions, where the flowers are, to encourage flowers and then pollination, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So that happens right at ground level, the grafted clones, that they branch out. So therefore you have more as the tree goes up that's not really high. That one I could see was maybe it's a jorquette, like a wine glass. It went out at waist height maybe. And so I could see that was a seed one. The seed ones, we've done some genetic testing, but with the guys in Trinidad, but looking at that, it would be difficult to say.
Yeah, I jumped ahead here. I mean, one of the things that I know of, because I want to get into the tasting in a couple of minutes. But one of the things that I know is that when you plant from seed, you may not know who the pollen donor was to the pod.
Yeah.
And so you plant it, and you don't know exactly what the genetic mix of the particular seed. Now, what you can do is you can take a very hardy, like a CCN 51, plant it from seed, get a very, very sturdy rootstock. And when you do your grafting, right, you can either do a conventional side graft or what they call micro insertion grafting onto the top, right, which will give you a very, very different looking tree. Right. And so you can look at the different way the branches come off of the trunk, and you can go, oh, I know whether this is grown from seed or it was grafted and how it was grafted.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a little bit of technicality. Now, what I wanted to do before we get into the tasting, right, is so this is a picture that was taken in the Humberto Huembes market in Managua.
Yes.
I can tell anybody who ever go to Nicaragua and you are you're going to fly into Managua, right? You need to go to this market, right? And if your Spanish is not very good, and even if your Spanish is very good, you want to have a local guide to take you through this. There's a wet market, there's a flea market. It's just overwhelming and amazing and absolutely crazy. And you have to go. Right?
Yep.
When I was doing my tours there, we took a day, and we took the group, and we made sure that everybody got a chance to go to the market while we were there. This is a church in Granada.
Yep.
Right. A beautiful church right by the Parqueo Central, the Central Park, the plaza. The architecture is this just old, grand Spanish style influence stuff. It's just an amazingly beautiful city. And so, if you're going to be in Managua, you might say, I'm going to go up into Matagalpa and then north into, but you need to make sure that you get to Granada. It's just an insanely beautiful city.
Beautiful.
And there's good food. as well, as I recall. We had some great food.
Yep.
And even if you're in the Central Park, this is a woman who is working to support her family by making food, which is available for sale in the market. You do have to be careful, like in many cases, about what you eat
Yeah.
when you go to places. I remember having a fresh seafood, a paiche ceviche,
Okay.
right? Terapoto, the night before I was flying to Nicaragua the first time, and I
Okay.
was like sick for days. So I
When you
spent
were in
most of my
Tarapoto in Peru.
yeah, when I was in Tarapartu in Peru for La Ruta del Cacao y Chocolate, the last night I was on the lake. We had this ceviche, this paiche ceviche, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, as I'm going to the airport in the cab, I'm going, oh, I'm going to be so sick. And I was like, when I arrived in Nicaragua the next morning, actually in El Salvador, transferred. Anyway, it's a long story. So be very, very careful what it is that when you go there. Anyway, so we have another quick note from, this is Mike. It must be amazing land. My favorite coffee farmer, the Finca Rio
Okay.
is just up the road from where you are. I'm assuming that this is in Nicaragua. Right. So what I want to do really, really quickly is to do a quick reset. Everybody, you're watching the PodSafe Chocolate. Here, my guest today is Sally McFadyen, who's one of the co-founders of Argencove Chocolate in Nicaragua. We were talking about, the voyage from Australia to Nicaragua, setting up a farm. There was one question we didn't get to. We'll try to get to at the end. But we're ready for a tasting. All right.
Sounds good.
And I want to let everybody know that when I originally put together the post, for today, that I had a specific order for tasting the chocolate. Sally said, no, we're going to do this in a different order. So why don't you walk us through now? Like, as for many of these tastings, people will know who've been a part of this. I try not to have tasted anything before walking into it. Now, I do have to say, I was at the Southwest Chocolate and Coffee Fest a couple of weeks ago, where I saw Peter, which is where I got these bars, and I did one of my tasting classes, and I have tasted one of the 4 bars. I'll let everybody know where it is. But for the most part, this is the first chance through many of them. And one of them that I tried there, which was the Mombacho, was one that Peter decided not to give me. I like this Mombacho was. I'm sorry.
When I looked at that, I think a few days ago, I'm like, oh, how did that happen? You don't have Mombacho at least.
I was sort of asking for it, and
sorry,
Peter,
we need another one.
Anyway, so it's very, very simple packaging, right? The die line is pretty simple. Everything that needs to be on the front is on the front, so that's really, really good. And there's a description on the back about the history. It's done in it's gold ink rather than being foiled, so there is this luxurious black and gold part of it. It's easy to open, easy to close. I mean, you're not doing anything on the inside, so there's story that could be told.
Yeah, we've actually got some drafts of that. Underway.
But apart from that, one of the things I like about it is also that the foiling is simple.
Yeah.
Right. It's not overly complicated in terms of what it's done, and so it's easy to get things open and actually put it back together and back in the box if you don't finish it at once. So I really, really do appreciate that. Cool. Now, for people who know, it's like pollen season here in Prescott, and so I'm going. So walk us through this first one, 80% batch number 18. What does batch number 18 mean? And
yeah, so 2 things. So these were some of the first beans actually that we really enjoyed when we came to Nicaragua. So the batch 18 is literally that. We really like these beans, and we did like 3 or 4 different roast profiles. Had it in the melange for varying hours, like 48 all the way to 72, and some variations. Then we added cocoa butter, 70, 75, with higher percentages, etc. We really liked the beans, but we just kept going, and I guess, and it really is experiment number 18, and we just thought to give people a appreciation of, some of the work that I guess some chocolate makers do.
So it's number 18, like CCN 51 is the 51st cross,
Yep.
right? By um,
Yep.
Homero
So,
Castro. So when you open up and you put your nose in it, it is a deep, rich, chocolatey aroma with, I think, which has got some fairly obvious roast notes to it. I mean, this is an 80%, which isn't going to tell you anything about bitterness or sweetness or anything like that. But there's a heavy roast profile. So I'm putting this in my mouth and I'm expecting, right, a flavor which is that roast. And I don't know anything about the beans. This is the first time I've tried it. So I have a thermometer right here and right by my desk. It's 73 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's about 23 C for everybody. So the bite is clean, right? The melted chew is clean. The initial hint is fruity acidity overlaid on top of this base of chocolate with this roast, right? And they're beating back and forth a little bit. So it's the acidity and then the chocolate and then the acidity and the chocolate, and it ends in the acidity, and then it's going back to the chocolate, right? So I don't know that I would be able to identify the fruit which is associated with that acid. Have you put a name to it?
Often apricot. Apricot often is what a common one that we would call that. So we
Stone fruit. Stone fruit. Okay.
Yeah. So like a citrus, stone fruit, maybe apricot. So.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that I would have picked apricot out of it. Now that you mention it, I can understand why people say that, which is actually one of the reasons why it's great to do these tastings in groups of people, right? Where you're talking to each other. Like, what is it? I don't quite get it. And I'm sitting here and I'm letting it, I mean, it clears out of the mouth very, very cleanly. And then there's this, as you breathe in, there's just this dominant chocolate note in the middle of your mouth, all the way back down your throat. Yeah. And it's lingering. And now I'm sort of getting, when you get an apricot or a peach and you sort of nibble on the pit, it's the pulp that's right around.
Yep.
That's the sort of flavor on the back end. It's not the straight apricot. There's some bitterness or something associated with, chewing on the pit.
Yep.
I mean, it's yummy, right? So this was the first beans that you encountered, and it's one of the first chocolates that you made?
Yeah, it is. So, and I don't know, for us, a very common feedback is for an 80%, it's actually quite smooth. So,
right. So, but what I would say is smooth is texturally related. And I look at the ingredients and, oh, you said licorice. I didn't get that. Apricot. I didn't read the notes. I wasn't going to. And you're adding extra butter here. So that is what contributes to the mouthfeel, the bite, the chew, and the melt. But what I will say is this is an 80%, and many people think, well, anything over 70 is just way too bitter, right? And there's no connection between cocoa content and bitterness, right? And this is a bar that really does establish that fact. It is an 80%. It's not bitter at all. It's just this a little more intense chocolatey, but with this wonderful, almost European style melt on the finish, which is really, really nice. You've given me the 90% as the next thing to try. This is backwards. I made the mistake of looking on the back now that I know where the tasting notes are. I'm going to avoid them. Try not to be influenced by them. So tell us about the 90%.
Yeah. So this is new as of December. For like maybe the last 2 years, everyone's been like, you've got to have 100% bar. And so we'd work on it and didn't like it. We don't eat a lot of high percentage bars, but obviously we have different people who we do different tastings with and give us feedbacks for our research and development sort of group. And then last year we started playing around with some different beans, and these are a blend. Okay. And we made some higher percentage chocolate, and this is where we sort of really enjoyed this as opposed to pushing to has to be 100.
Yeah, this has got a very different aroma profile. I mean, it's not heavy on the roast like the 82
Yeah.
was, and it's earthier. I mean, it's got this very, very, I'm saying almost like tree moss funk, but in a good way, kind of nose. I mean, I was surprised at just how different it was. I mean, it again, maybe tree moss funk sounds ick. I don't want to do that, but believe me, in this particular case, it's really, really an attractive aroma, and it's not as in your nose. I mean, it's much more subtle. You have to breathe in. All right, and it's crispier than the 82% is, even though you think that the base basically 90% would have a higher base fat content. So, right before you add the cocoa butter, so that's interesting. The break is crispier, and the bite is harder. The chew.
This has less cocoa butter, so we actually add only a couple of percentage to this one. So,
right. Yeah. So once it gets into your mouth, I mean, again, texturally, it's really, really well made. The bite, the chew, the melt, the way it cleans. There's no grittiness. All those kinds of basic technical things that you're looking for. But this just hits you right up front with red fruit. And that red fruit carries through. Now, I made the mistake of looking at the tasting notes, and they say cranberry. Right.
Everyone's different. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah, it's like, so okay. My thought process is this cranberry, right? That's what's going in. And I also noticed citrus and licorice again, which the licorice comes in. Oh, maybe that's what I'm smelling on the nose. Maybe that's what I'm smelling. It's not. It's not necessarily tree moss, but maybe it's like a salted licorice without the salt on top. I mean, there's that the flavor. And again, at the end here, whereas in the 82 it was more dominant with the fruit until it cleared out in chocolate, the beating back and forth with this one happens closer to the end.
Yeah.
So again, there's a complexity in terms of the flavor journey. Now, excuse me. Again, this is my 1-year anniversary of being in Prescott, and I'm like being imitated by Paul. But again, I think what's really, really interesting about this, and for people who are afraid of trying high cocoa content chocolates because they think they're just going to be overly bitter.
Yeah.
Right. This is not. I think about, for example, the Cluzel Noir and Vanille at 99%, and what they do is they add a little bergamot to it, bergamot, in order to be able to add the sort of floral note to it. Or you're really worried about 100%, dialing it back down. So if you're not worried about sugar from a dietary perspective, this is a really, really approachable 90%. Right? You may say, it's not something I would do every day or on a regular basis, right? But it's very, very well made, and it's not gonna like astringency or anything like that. Just gonna take off the yeah. And what's really interesting, coming through the end, I mean, the flavor here and everything is up on the roof of my mouth and in my nose on the long finish. It's sort of roundedness in the back of my throat.
Yeah.
And what's coming through at the very end is just this really, really clear, gentle chocolate note. Right? Which I didn't taste anywhere up until
at the end.
Which is really, really interesting. So one of the tricks, so as a judge, for people who want to know, one of the tricks that I do is that, as I'm finished one thing and I'm written my notes and getting to the second, getting ready to do the next one, what I'm doing is I haven't cleaned out my mouth and I'm waiting for this 2 to 3 to 4 minutes, right? If I possibly can, to figure out what happens on the long finish, right? Because if there are defects in the beans, or there are defects in roasting, or there are defects in processing, this is where you'll pick them up. I mean, they will become evident there. And for me, if I haven't detected an alternative sugar on the front, right, this is where it will show up on the end.
Yeah.
And, it's still here in my mouth, and I've been talking and all this kind of stuff. Just this really, really clear chocolate note, which you might miss if you went on to the next thing or took a sip of coffee or a sip of water, which is interesting. So,
Yeah.
these two, the 82 and 90,
Yep.
I'll show the front. Which sells more?
Well, it's a bit hard to say. The 80 does, but we've had the 80 for 4 or 5 years, and we've had the 92 since December. So,
So let me jump in really, really quickly, because this is something on my mind. And it's something that I asked Mark Burrows, a pollinator, when he was on earlier this week. That Argencove, you personally were not there, but Argencove was at the Southwest Chocolate and Coffee Festival, and you were at the Craft Chocolate Experience last week.
Yes.
I don't know if Peter was in San Francisco as well. I'm sort of, so you can't talk about the questions that people asked as they walked up to you and how they were the same or different. But did you notice a real difference in terms of what sold and what didn't between the Albuquerque Festival and the San Francisco Festival?
That's a good question. To be honest, most of the analysis we've done this week has been between the San Francisco and the DC Festival that were on the same day. I know that the 80 sold well at both. Just because, so we have 4 different 70% bars, which we're obviously not going into today. But we have those, we have 77% and 80% and the 92%. So we've got 7 different plain bars. The 92 is, I mean, there was, one person or a couple of people came up and they're like, what have you got? I only do over 85. And so there are the occasional people who do that. And obviously there are some people who are more the dark milk, or 70%. I think where the 80 has had, a lot of success is because it's not kind of, it's not for some, for people who aren't, really into the above 90s, I guess. It's still quite, it's not super bitter for an 80%. And so they enjoy the 70s. They try this. Actually, this doesn't taste like I would expect. It's not this really bitter. And, I'm trying to eat it. It's good for me. Eat it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and they really enjoy it. So the 80 actually sells, it's actually
really, really.
Yeah.
So the thing that interested me in what Mark Burrows was talking about the difference between Albuquerque and San Francisco is that in San Francisco, it was the plain single origins that sold better. And in Albuquerque, it was the inclusion bars that sold better. But very different audiences. But speaking of inclusions, let's get to this one. So what are we looking at here?
Okay. So this is all one is our banana, cinnamon, and clove bar. So this is one of our inclusions. It's on a 70% cacao, like dark chocolate. It is one of my favorite inclusions. So what you
Peter shared that there was some Aussie breakfast that this reminded him.
Banana pancakes. I don't think that's
banana pancakes. That's
Australian. Right. So I guess a couple of key things. So you can see, like on the back, they're real banana pieces. So what we use is, in Nicaragua, they have the local national banana, which is smaller, it's sweeter. We take those, dehydrate them, and then cut them up and sprinkle those plus cinnamon and clove on the back of the bar. And as you can see, when Clay held that up, the whole bar, we do make a big effort to try and just put 2 or 3 on the bar, so that if when you're eating it, there should be some banana on it. So
yeah, I mean, this is a bar where it's hard to get at just the chocolate, no matter how you break it or where you go. There is, it looks like either the cinnamon or the clove are sprinkled on the back as well. They're not refined in.
Yep.
So what's interesting for anybody who's doing a bar like this. I mean, what you need to do is you need to smell the side with the inclusion on it, and then smell the side without the inclusion. They'll get very, very different aromas. I have, cinnamon in my nose, and so turning the other side is going to make it really difficult to figure that out. Right. So this is a dehydrated banana, right? So it'll be slightly chewy, right? And what's interesting for me is that the chocolate has some fruitiness in it that comes really, really quickly. it's moderated or mediated, if you want to say, by the sweetness of the banana, right? And then the mixture of clove and cinnamon starts to overtake it, with the clove coming through on the end. So it's a really, really fun flavor
Yeah.
journey, right?
Yep.
And doing it because it comes through. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult not to finish this entire bar
It's
before we begin.
And as a maker, you know, like the 92, like I love the 92, but I'm not going to eat a bar of that. This, it's like sharing is optional, and it's just gone. Like it just, I don't know, it just disappears. So when you talk about different foods and ones that you just have to keep eating, this fits in this category for sure. So
yeah, you know, there's the balance between the sweetness of the chocolate and the sweetness of the banana. Yeah, and having been in Nicaragua, I know exactly the banana variety that you're talking about. And then just in the nose, I mean, is it locally grown cinnamon? I don't know if they grow. No, okay. I didn't know if they grew cinnamon in Nicaragua.
No. I mean, I'd
How
love
about
to
the
be
cloves? Are they growing cloves in Nicaragua?
No. One of the things that with our inclusions, you know, we'd love to be able to use all local. However, you know, obviously as a business, one of our considerations is consistent,
Right. Yeah.
reliable, hygienic, etc. So, yeah, I mean, we're always on the lookout. If that comes up, then we'll definitely, you know, take that opportunity. But for the moment, for those, yeah, they're commercially sourced. So
Gotcha. Well, the next bar, and we're like, I don't want to leave that last one, but we have two more I want to get through the end. So this is another 70% dark. Is it the same chocolate?
No, different or slightly different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and this is with passion fruit, or in Spanish maracuya, or in Portuguese maracujá. All right, so you go through.
They call it kalala here too.
Okay, and the ingredient says passion fruit juice. Right?
So yeah.
Are you dehydrating it? Are you freeze drying it? Because obviously, I say obviously, usually you don't put liquid into chocolate you want to temper.
Yeah. So out of all of our bars, this is the hardest to make. It basically, we take fresh passion fruits, we remove the seed, and we make like a syrup. Basically, we reduce it right down to get rid of all the moisture, and then we mix that into the chocolate as it's coming out of the tempering machine. So, as exactly as you say, if there's too much moisture, it does not go well.
It doesn't go well. No, I understand. So, again, with all the others, I mean, the chocolate itself, when you think of temper, the bite, the chew, the melt, you think about the experience of the mouthfeel. I mean, just can't call anything into question. Excellent. The fruitiness here is definitely passion fruit all the way through.
Yeah.
So it's not competing with any other fruit in here. And what I like about this is that passion fruit sometimes gets interpreted too delicately, and so it becomes, you really need to pay attention to get there, or it becomes real passion fruit, right? Which can be very highly acidic if you're not careful, even though it's very, very sweet. And what's nicer again is the balance, right, of the passion fruit. At times it's more dominant, at times it recedes, it comes back. In the end, however, there's this nice little delicate, fruity, passion fruit up in the nose. It's like, one of my favorite tropical fruits, right?
And that's, as Australians, love passion fruit on dessert, pavlovas, and we were like, we've got to make a passion fruit bar.
Right. Are you one of those people who believe that Pav was invented in Australia or New Zealand?
Oh,
or you're agnostic. You're agnostic about that.
We all enjoy Pav.
No, I spent 3 years as a teenager in New Zealand.
Oh, that's right.
There's not a whole lot of culinary fights between New Zealand and Australia.
but that's
but
one.
the invention of the PAV
Yep.
is certainly one of them. And even though the kiwi fruit is what, Chinese gooseberry,
Yeah.
and still it's all a mess. But what's really, really, I mean, again, I'm sitting here and talking, and I'm letting it go through. I mean, the evolution of the flavor, the way it comes in, comes out, it's not beating strongly. It's just changing over time,
Yeah.
as the fat melts and as the sugar. It's a really, really complex expression of passion fruit, which usually there's not a whole lot of complexity when it comes to passion fruit. And I would say, all the bars that I've tasted so far, that what comes forward. I mean, that is a theme which runs through all of them. I mean, these
Yeah.
could be very, very, very simple expressions. And especially if you're blending beans, you tend to blend out some of the varietal differences and you get sameness, right?
Yeah.
That even in the blends, you're getting this wonderful evolution of flavor between the chocolate, if it's just the chocolate, right, and
Yeah.
whatever the inclusion is. I mean, it's really, 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 really very nicely done and very nicely balanced. And I can see why, the passion fruit was a bronze winner at the Northwest Chocolate Festival, and the banana was a gold in 2021. And it's understandable why the judges are rewarding the work you've done. It's really, really quite lovely. Before we get into the last bar, which is different from all the others, what is the major challenge? I mean, you're a cacao farmer, you're a chocolate maker. What's the major challenge in this recent time when the price of cocoa has gone through the roof? What is the advantage of being a chocolate maker in a producing country?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, so the chocolate we're making right now, like this week, is obviously from beans from last year, so just in case people aren't aware, from like the day that we pick the pod to the day we actually make chocolate, I mean, that could be like 7 or 8 months just by the time you let things cure and age and everything else. So so we're still, we've got our cocoa supply at the moment. Obviously having we're harvesting today actually. Having your own beans, excuse me, obviously it's a good time, to be able to have that. We sometimes buy barber. We do all our fermentation and drying, so we do supplement a little bit. We're not just strictly from our farm, but the majority is. So, we still see obviously the increase in price in the wet barber in the last few months when we, paid directly to the farm, so that's fine. I mean, obviously we're fortunate in this situation, and we also have a good relationship with the farm, so we do buy the barber, which is obviously important. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, and one thing that people may not be aware of, and this is a conversation I had a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, with Ed Seguin, right? Who is one of the leading for this program. Works with Darren Suka at Cocoa Research Institute in Trinidad on the Heirloom Cacao Preservation Fund project. Is that most people don't understand the need to let beans age and cure. That if you were to take beans immediately off the drying pad and turn them into chocolate, you often run up with this taste of wet cardboard.
Of it,
right?
like
It's really, but most people don't have to worry about it, because by the time it gets from the farm to the port, across the ocean to your factory, the 3 to 4 to 5 months required, right, for this process to happen, right? So it's equilibration of chemicals across the entire bean, maybe some off gassing and some other things like that. There's a chance, but it's nuts, and it's something you do have to worry about if you own a farm, is you just can't transform your cocoa beans immediately into chocolate, right?
Well, I think that's a really good point. And when we do our chocolate factory tours here, when you explain that to people, and then we age our chocolate too, they're like, wow, okay, it is actually that long a process. So,
yeah.
So,
I mean, yes, it's one of the world's favorite foods that people know less about than almost any other thing. They do.
Yep.
So last bar, right? You wanted to make this the last bar. It was originally the
Yes.
first bar. And this is not something I would think of as either traditionally Nicaraguan or Australian or Peruvian, which is
Yeah.
pecan pie. So a
Yeah.
caramelized white chocolate. You're using panela rather than white sugar, right, in this,
Correct.
and then
Uh,
roasted
yeah. So you
or
can see
both.
on the back. Yeah. So you can see on the back there's the roasted pecan nuts and then the
Mhm.
panela. So in the actual chocolate.
Okay, gotcha. So
Okay.
it's like a caramel. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. So from an ingredients point of view, we've got the cocoa butter. We
Mhm.
actually press our own cocoa butter. So we've got the cocoa butter, the milk powder, and the cane sugar. And then the
Mhm.
inclusions of the roasted pecan nut and the panela. So 2 years ago now, we started to press our own butter, and we played around. We made some white chocolate. It was interesting, uh, but we weren't completely happy with it. And so we tried this of
Mhm.
basically toasting the milk powder,
Mhm.
um, and then adding it, and that gave this caramel white chocolate, so like a dulce de leche for people
Right.
who, in Latin America. So we
Mhm.
thought it was really very different, obviously. And I
Mhm.
think as a chocolate maker, I mean, I could make 70% bars forever,
Right.
but it's about having diversity and
Mhm.
the things that
Yeah.
some people enjoy and others not so, and
Right.
you know, um,
Mhm.
so yeah. Oh, mine's melted. I can't actually pick it up.
Yeah. So I mean, so the primary aroma here is going to be sort of like an undeodorized cocoa butter, right? Which is
Correct.
there. And so
Yeah.
and then the pecans and the panela, like it's not actually really fragrant undeodorized cocoa butter.
Hmm.
And is Nicaragua producing their own whole milk, or is this imported? Their own
No,
whole milk
this
powder.
is this is milk powder from here, but we toast it. So
Gotcha. Well, I mean, in many producing countries where cocoa is grown, they don't
mm,
actually have their own local milk powder production.
yeah, yeah. So
Mhm.
I mean, we've played around with different options. So um, the and then
Mhm.
we wanted to play around with. Growing up, we had pecan trees on my farm as a kid, and we had a lot of pecan pie. And so when we made this chocolate, we really loved it. We're super excited. And then, came up the idea of what different nuts or fruits, or
Mhm.
what are we going to add to it?
Mhm.
And I've always really liked vanilla. So it's like an unrefined sugar,
Mhm.
sort of this molassesy, brown,
Mhm.
sugary taste.
Mhm.
And we started playing around, caramelized it, broke it into glass sheets,
Mhm.
and basically the back of the bar, as you saw, had like the glass
Mhm.
shards of panela and the
Right.
pecans. So I thought it was
Mhm.
just, and I like how the panela might get stuck in your teeth, or just
Mhm.
this, I don't know. Um,
And it's a soft crack, not a hard crack, which
yeah,
is also really, really interesting to
yeah,
know. So anybody who knows me knows that as a judge, I would rather be faced with a flight of 10 flavored white chocolates with inclusions
hmm,
than 10 70% two ingredients from Peru. It's like,
okay,
it's like, so this is playing like, as a judge, one of my favorite categories because it's about a gestalt impression
yeah,
as much as it is, oh, let's go and, you know, decompose it in our brain, right?
yeah,
So I'm paying attention to what's going on in my mouth, not what's going on in my head.
yeah,
Um, and this is a warm, comfy hug
yep,
of a chocolate, right? Which is a way to, which is when you think about it, it's like you're going to put it in your mouth. It's not going to challenge you. There's nothing about it's going to
yeah,
challenge you, but it's not overly sweet. It's got the nuts. It's got the texture
yeah,
of the panello, which is different from the texture of the nuts. Um, and again, I'm going to sit down and I could see sit down and having this with a chai tea,
yep,
or if I'm doing like a real milky coffee drink or
mm,
something like that. I mean, these are the sorts of things. Or, gosh, taking a banana pancake and putting a square of this on top of a banana pancake, right? In addition to the syrup, it's like I get it completely. I mean, it's just again this warm, soft, comfy hug
Yep.
of a chocolate, which is really, really nice. The only thing that I would say that it might be interesting is if you're taking the panela and in a syrup form, and then you're spreading it out so you get it in is just before it hardens completely is a little bit of flake salt on it.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
Right? And so just a little bit, every once in a while, you're going to get this crunch of salt in there,
Yeah.
which would provide another layer of complexity to this, which would be a lot of fun. I mean, it's brilliant the way it is. I mean, again, as a judge, this is the kind of stuff I like to see.
Cool.
On a regular basis. And it's a silver winner in the Americas Award of international. So I understand exactly why the judges rewarded that way, right? Might tone down the sweetness a little. I think there's some local Nicaraguan salt, as I recall, from being there.
Not yes, but there are salt mines here. It's not the same as like in your salt in Peru. But there are some local salt.
Pink flamingo salt in Mexico.
Yeah.
Right? So you could do regional. I mean, but you get the idea. It would be interesting to see how that works. Just to go. So we're at the hour, and I want to really thank you, Sally. I want to thank everybody who's been watching from the very, very beginning to be here today. Do you have any last comments that you want to make before we close out today's episode?
No, I just think, thanks so much for today, for the opportunity. And, obviously, like as you say, these are your favorite kind of interviews and doing this. I think as an industry, we certainly appreciate you doing these because it's cool getting to know different people. And as a consumer, I find it interesting, obviously, to have this opportunity to hear from different makers, what they're doing. And often at festivals, you don't get the time to not deep dive, but go into this detail because it's, they are busy. So, and so much about craft chocolate is about, educating to people to understand. So I think this is awesome how that contributes to that. So thank you.
So just real quickly, this is the homepage of Argencove right now. If I'm in the United States, I can purchase this in the United States.
Correct. And so
Europe as well, or just the US?
No, we ship to wherever. So if you we ship everything from Virginia. If you're within the US, there's if you do anything over $60, there's free shipping. We ship internationally. We ship to different places in Europe. We ship to Canada. Obviously, we ship to Australia, and then that just there's obviously a different shipping cost associated with that. We are just tonight, we'll be sending out an email about Mother's Day and with a 15% off our site, including this little cool pack of, it's kind of like minis.
So like what's on the screen right now. Oops.
Well, that's a different one. Yeah, that's a different one.
But like that, kind of like that one, but smaller.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and it has the banana and the pecan bar that we tried today.
Gotcha. That's great to know. So if you're interested, go to the Argencove website right now and sign up. Right, so you can be on that Mother's Day email newsletter. And what I want to do is just say, here's the homepage of the Chocolate Life. Right now, you can go there. If you're not currently a member of the Chocolate Life, you can click on the join button, become a member, support the work we're doing here. If you've been watching on YouTube and like the video over the course of the last hour, please go give a thumbs up to that video, right? Comment, share, do all the things to help spread the word. And I'm going to be back here on Tuesday of next week with Mash Pea Chocolate from Ecuador. They were also at the Southwest Chocolate and Coffee Fest, and going to be doing a tasting with their U.S. representative as well as somebody who's going to be dialing in from Quito as a part of that as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. So this is I met all these wonderful people in Albuquerque, and so I took advantage of being there to schedule these, and I'm looking forward to all of them and not looking forward to all of them ending. But Sally, it's been, as I said, I met Peter for the first time in 2015. We correspondence. This might be the first time we've seen each other like face to face, even virtually. And it's been a pleasure to meet you finally, to hear you talk about
Thank
the
you,
work you're
and you
doing,
too.
to talk about not all of the challenges, but that there are benefits as well as challenges of being a chocolate maker in a producing country, right?
Yeah,
Of being what I prefer to call, instead of tree to bar, calling farm to table. So
yeah,
being a farm to table chocolate maker, which I know
yeah,
is branding that you've adopted on your website.
yeah.
I noticed that you've done. I think it's really important. I love the work you're doing, and just wish you all success moving forward, and hope to have you back here in the future with something which is new, and something which is interesting, and something that is fun. Because remember, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. And so until the next episode of Pod Save Chocolate, ciao everyone. Sally.